So lots has been going on uh, for a while. One could argue since the formation of samsara, too much has been happening. But definitely, lots has been happening for us and here in the United States. Um, and it's it's a pattern, right? The violence, the hate, all of that comes from this expression um, of delusion, which is of course the opposite of clarity, where we actually don't know um, what's happening and we get lost in a lot of reactivity. And of course, often reactivity does lead to harm, because in reactivity, there's really no space for wisdom, there's no space for care or compassion. And these are, of course, these behaviors, this deeply indoctrinated um, thing that's ingrained in our consciousness, right? And the project of Buddha Dharma is actually to release that reactivity, right? That reactivity to everything, and to come back into this experience of space, spaciousness, right? Spaciousness, of course, is an experience that's always happening. Space is just, it just is, like space is. And what our practice is about is actually remembering that space. I would argue that mindfulness, the Satipatthana, the four foundations, that sutra, the Satipatthana, is really about the remembrance of space, that we have space to make choices. And those choices really, first, is about remembering who we are and the nature of things itself, and to make choices to reduce the harm that we create for ourselves and for others. I was thinking a lot this past few days also just about the dream, right? I'm not, this is always how a 2-hour talk on the matrix begins, when I start talking about a dream. And then soon we're riding through the whole series. But I am allowing myself to respond, not react to the strong desire to go down that path back into the matrix. But this idea of the dream, samsara, or what I call in New Saints, the carceral state, this is, in a really strange way, is really not happening, right? And I know this is like, for some of you, this is like basic elementary, but for a lot of people, this is really hard. This is a nuanced experience that is really difficult to really, kind of lean into, that this is a dream, that this is real, but it's not real, and we can say, well, if it's not real, then why do things matter? Because it actually matters, because this is us playing out certain tendencies, even if it is a dream, even if we're like, just think about going to sleep and dreaming, you go to sleep, you dream, you're still rehearsing certain things, you're still like engaged in certain kinds of activities that actually imprint the mind stream, the consciousess, right? And the consciousness, right, has these, from all the many lives that we've lived and moved through, the mind stream has all of these, I would say, indentations, right? And these indentations actually are expressions of karma. So it's like these indentations make it really difficult for the consciousness to be kind of smooth and fluid, because you have these lumps and these dents in it, right? And the more we engage with these lumps and dents, the deeper we make them, the more ingrained they become. and they become really, really deep in the consciousness, right? And so every time our consciousness kind of incarnates into this dream reality, we're still bringing, these karmic debts, in with us. And so that's what we're really struggling with, are these indentations in our consciousness. And we're trying to like smooth them out. It's like we're trying to take the consciousness to an auto body, shop, and we're trying to like really like get these dents unplugged and smoothed out. And that's what we call practice, that not always kind of relating, and getting tripped up around these indentations in the consciousness. So we are all people beings, conscious beings, sentient beings, who are all trying to kind of undent ourselves karmically and through practice. And sometimes our dents can kind of, collect together. And, that's when we start having collective experiences. And these dents are not always about harm and violence, but they're just ways in which we they're narratives, narratives emerge from these dents that we start reacting to as well. And we say, oh, this is what it is. This is what it means to be alive. And this is what it means to have a mind. Like, I'm just going to have to deal with all of this. And that's really not the case. The consciousness is malleable. It's like a thin sheet of metal, right? It bends, but we have this incredible opportunity through practice to smooth that out, to release these bumps and these indentations, and to return to this fluid, flowing experience of consciousness, right? Where we're not getting trapped around these indentations. Another way to think about it too is like a stream. You go to a stream, you see rocks and wood and all kinds of stuff in the stream, and some of these things block the stream from flowing really fluidly. You can get something like a beaver. A beaver can come along and begin to dam up the stream, creating like this block, right? And that's what many of us are struggling with, are these blocks. And I would say these blocks or these dams that are built within the fluidity of our consciousness, I would call that trauma, that gets blocked. Again, what we're trying to do is release those dams, those blockages, so consciousness begins to flow really evenly and fluidly, right? But that means going through the discomfort of like unblocking and smoothing out, right? Releasing, the tension or the energies that maintain these blocks and these indentations, right? And this is why the work of liberation in general is not so appealing for a majority of beings, because it means that you have to go back into the consciousness to start releasing these energies, these indentations, these blocks, right? And that means that we have to experience these blocks, these indentations. And the experiencing has to move through, this idea, this experience of the body as well, because the body is also an expression of consciousness as well, right? So everything must be experienced and released, right? But nothing can be released until we move through experiencing, right? So we move from reactivity to the space and to responsiveness through the means of experiencing, letting that energy move through us, like that energy release, and feeling that release, letting it go, right? Like you can't let go of something that you can't experience, right? Like how would you know that it's being released if you're not experiencing that release? But what you're really experiencing is the movement of energy, right? It's the movement of energy and the reshaping of the sense of self around that released energy as well. So those two things are happening. Again, the release of that energy, the release of those indentations, those karmic blocks, right? Releasing that energy, and the ways in which the sense of self, our sense of self and ego, are actually trying to figure out what we are now that this thing has been released. And that is the perpetual work of the sense of self, is always trying to figure out what it is when something has changed, right? And of course, that's my fundamental definition also of grief. It's like the self trying to figure out who we are, what we are after something has changed, you know? And we've talked about this a lot over our time together here as well. So, so when I think about being in the world, I see people doing their best to make these indentations, these karmic blocks workable, but not always knowing how or what to do, how to do it or what to do, right? Or what to do and how to do it, right? And that creates, I think, as the Temptation saying, a ball of confusion, if I may. And which is a wonderful song to reference. I want y'all to listen to that, Ball of Confusion by the Temptations. So these are some of the things that we can just sit with and contemplate in our practice, right? I think this is so helpful for me. It has been helpful for me because it's really helped me to move past a lot of confusion, into this kind of knowingness, that like I can be in the world and I can see all the stuff happening, right? And I can experience, harm and violence, and I can see this happening with others. And I can understand it, to a great extent. And I seek to understand it because I am seeking to experience freedom from the ways in which I am relating to my own karmic blocks and indentations as well. If we don't, this is a hard one here, so brace yourself. Like if you don't see yourself reflected at least a little in the people around you, then that's a kind of disassociation that's never going to get you free. Like if it's just me and others, like this is me and this is them, right? It's hard for us to really understand and see our capacity to do the same things that other people are doing. And we lose a really incredible, powerful tool for our practice, that mirroring, the way that people are mirroring ourselves back to us. That we all do have the capacity to do anything, and if you look into Buddhist philosophy, it would argue that we have in fact done everything, that we do indeed, as sentient conscious beings, have the capacity to do whatever it is that we are trying to distance ourselves from. And so much of the practice here is actually beginning to create a kind of openness to hold space for these karmic dents, indentations, blockages that actually can give rise to these experiences, these actions, thoughts, speech, that do create the kinds of harm that we're trying to distance ourselves from. That's a really higher level practice, but that practice is really about going into, as Pema Children said, going into the places that scare us, right? And then learning how to show up in those places and just hold space for all of this energy, these karmic patternings, these indentations, these blockages, right? The ways in which reactivity creates the experience of harm, you know, that the thing itself is not the issue, but is our relationship to the thing. That's the issue. It's not necessarily, and this is strictly Buddhist psychology here, right? So it's not necessarily that I have this desire to do something, but the problem, the issue that we're focusing on is how I'm choosing to relate to that desire. Am I reacting to it? Am I responding to it? Am I choosing to experience that desire? Because experiencing isn't actually reacting, you know. So much of our experience, you know, is beneath so much of these experiences is really is really discomfort, is suffering, right? And our reactivity is kind of like this sophisticated mechanism, you know, that we've trained ourselves into engaging in. Like, so when we react, we're not experiencing. And so that reactivity keeps us from experiencing deep discomfort or suffering, right? But in Buddhist liberation work, we can't get free until we begin to experience even what we think can't be experienced, you know. That we will eventually get liberated when we have the capacity to experience everything without reacting to it. You know, that's what we're trying to get to, right? And then moving into a space of responsiveness. And that space of responsiveness is where the work of the Bodhisattva or the Buddha saint emerges. When one has tremendous capacity to respond to the suffering of the world, to suffering of the people, and not necessarily create more harm, but to respond hoping to alleviate harm, that makes you a bodhisattva. And that's what we're trying to get to. Even the bodhisattva will not be 100% violence free, right? We will always, because of interdependence or interrelatedness, we will always hurt beings. You know, we are always stepping on insects that we didn't even know existed, you know, can't even see. And even just that will make us, you know, necessarily, it will keep us from getting to this idea of being 100% nonviolent, because we will always have the capacity to create violence for some being. So what we're doing, you know, so much of the Medicine Buddha Tantra, so much of this tradition is really, like, traditionally, it's really about undoing these karmic knots, right? That's really what Medicine Buddha is really about. That's really, honestly, what all the deities, the wisdom deities that we practice is really, it's really about, like, moving into our consciousness and, like, letting go, releasing, moving these energies that are stuck in our consciousness, right? And that's the healing that we're talking about. That's the healing that we're trying to get to in our practice, right? And something that I've noticed, and I notice it over and over again, is when things happen for us, you know, in our communities, when tragedies and things happen, and notice how we just revert back into our trauma, you know, and the trauma actually becomes like a pillow, you know, like I would say like it's not a safety net, but I would say it's like a safety net because it's something that feels like it catches us when we go off the ledge. Like we can fall back into our trauma, and that trauma is overreactivity, hypersensitivity. It's these old patterns, particularly associated with disembodiment, disassociation, it's stuckness, right? It's numbness. And from those experiences, all kinds of relationship things, of course, come, like paranoia and distrust and so forth. But again, when things happen, we go back to it. And what I began to understand about my practice years ago was that like I don't want to fall back into these same old trauma trappings when things happen. I want to fall back into space when I'm confronted with the intensity of tragedy and crisis. Like space is actually what's trying to hold us, to take care of us, right? Space is where we're actually like emanating from, the space and emptiness, right? Space and emptiness ride together, right? That's where I want to fall back to. I want to fall back into the space, not into the trauma, right? Because if we get stuck back in the trauma, we start reacting, and then that's when we start having these experiences of being overwhelmed. And I've seen a lot of that too, just like looking over, what people post on social media, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of shutdown, a lot of, disembodiment, numbness, right? So my practice has essentially been about trying to actually develop a relationship to space rather to trauma. And some of us are confused because we have confused our trauma and mingled trauma with experiences of freedom. So we actually don't know what freedom is. So when people talk about freedom, they're actually talking about trauma. To go beyond trauma, right, is to go back into, this work of experiencing, right, of releasing. And that itself will be a painful experience. Like I've never known trauma release work or even somatic work, right, to be like fun times for anyone. It's been pretty grueling for me, right? I don't like to talk about my practice so much because it's really all just centered around suffering, like moving through suffering. Like when people ask me what a practice feels like sometimes, like common practice, I'm like, oh, it just hurt like hell. And then another person will go, well, it's great. Like I had a really great time, That doesn't negate my practice, right? But when I practice, I don't practice to feel good. So that's not my intention at the beginning of practice to feel good. I practice to get free. And to get free, you have to move through the suffering. And I am personally very much interested in moving through suffering to get free. Right. Just getting happy, I don't want to like go off on anything right now. I know it seems like I am, but I haven't gone off on anything. I haven't mentioned the Matrix or Beyonce, so I'm still hovering outside of being in control of this. But and once I say this, we're going to get into our practice. But I think so. I see so many people trying to help, and I think it's amazing and it's lovely, it's wonderful, But like I don't want to be specific, but you're going to read this as a specificity that you're going to link back to very specific things. So you take this as you will, but oh boy. I just think that happiness isn't the appropriate response to what's happening right now. Like, I don't think a program on cultivating happiness is what we need. That's very radical, I get that. I know some of you are ready to shut down and go somewhere else. But happiness is limiting. Like happiness is about finding comfort in samsara, and that's not what we're doing. If you're sitting with me and practicing with me, that's not what I'm doing for you, right? Like my intention is never for you to be happy and comfortable, right? I want you to be free. And whatever happens in our work to get free, wonderful. If you get happy, wonderful. I'm not saying that I'm unhappy. I'm just saying that that's not the goal. But I do enjoy this experience of happiness and joy in space. Absolutely wonderful. But that's not what I'm practicing for. So when I say going for freedom, like when you go for ultimate complete freedom, all this stuff is going to happen anyway. The happiness and the joy and the gratitude and the spaciousness, all that's going to happen, right? But you have to shoot towards the end. Like you have to look to the horizon and say, that's where I'm going, right? Instead of just looking down the block and saying, if I can just get down the block, I'll be okay. No, we're going all the way, freedom and liberation are the same, the exact same thing. So I use those interchangeably, freedom and liberation, like freedom from reactivity, freedom from the binary, freedom from dualism, right? The experience of oneness, emptiness, space, energy. It's our most direct, simplest, evolved divine self. It's God, right? To transcend comfort and discomfort. Like ultimate liberation, ultimate freedom, there's no such thing as comfort and discomfort. It's just free, right? If you're always trying to get comfortable, you're always going to be running away from discomfort, right? So let's transcend both of these. Like, let's get back to a place where we're not running away from anything. We just are. We just are. But to get to that experience of ultimate being, ultimate liberation, we have to do the groundwork, right? We have to do the meticulous, I call it the grunt work, but like it's the meticulous, grueling work of cultivating awareness, compassion, and love, learning to experience, learning to connect to space, learning to respond, right? Learning to move energy, learning to let go of trauma, move through trauma. That's the kind of grueling work, but this is work that is everlasting, right? This is the work, and I know this is hard. This is like really hard to say that this is a long game that we're playing, not a short game. This isn't a sprint. Like this is a very long marathon, and you must prepare accordingly. And we prepare, well, I mentioned all the ways we can prepare accordingly, but like one way that I have had to prepare myself is to say, yeah, like what I'm doing now in my practice, I may not even see the fruition of in this life. I know some of us really struggle with certain practices like love, patience, and all of that. And we may think, oh my God, I'm not getting anywhere, but you are. You may not feel it, you may not experience it, but you will, because that has a deep impact in our consciousness, right? And that fruition will happen down the road, maybe in lives down the road. Like I would say that like so much of what I experience is practice that I've done countless lifetimes ago, right? That like this moment of space that I experienced, it's just something that I was struggling with many, many lifetimes ago. And now it's ripening in this moment. And that's the kind of thinking that we bring into our practice. It's not just about this life. It's about what's coming. It's about our transition into the bardo and the spirit realm. It's about our reincarnations into different forms of life down the road, right? And hopefully we get incarnated into sentient, you know, beings, conscious beings that have the capacity to continue to think about freedom and to work towards ultimate freedom. Absolutely, that's the goal, right? That's what we're praying for as well in our practice, that we get to be reincarnated in forms that we can continue to practice. And because all of you are here, it means, quite honestly, that you've done a tremendous amount of work to get here. To be, to be conscious, to be interested in spiritual practice, to even think about these ideas means that you've done this quite often in the past. And this is a momentum that we're building, towards ultimate liberation. Some of you may already be free, right? And this is why I really like the show Severance as well, because, Severance is, for me, this allegory, I think, around what awakened beings do to help. That awakened beings choose to enter into the dream, right? Knowing that they won't be conscious in the dream, but they will have an affinity that helps them return back to awakening. As you see in the show, right? That you can forget, but you don't forget who you don't forget this deep, authentic expression of who you are. You may forget details, but you don't forget the feeling of what it means and feels like to be free. And that's what leads us back, right? And that's the work of great beings who are able to do that. That's the great compassion of awakened beings, to enter back into a dream that they don't have to enter into in order to free others from the dream, like the Matrix, but quite honestly, like, I would choose to be someone who went into the Matrix, because it seemed to be a lot more interesting than living in a hole in the ground, even though it was like, seemed like a lot of fun, you have like Jada Pinkett Smith and Brother Cornel West hanging around. Like, yeah, of course, who wouldn't want to be in a place like that? I have been in a place like that with Cornel West, but that the Matrix seems anyway, and then I like to do that tonight. See, discipline. Yeah, but on a smaller scale, many of us do choose to enter into situations that are really rough because we know that we can help. And that's really, what the Bodhisattva does here. That kind of work also helps to smooth out that compassion, that bodhicitta, which is this wish for beings to be free. Like, that begins to smooth through and release a lot of karma for us, because it begins to decenter the sense of self, right? And once we decenter self, we have access to much more of this reality of spaciousness, because the sense of self isn't like right in front of us, taking up all the space and room. All right, okay, so great, awesome, fantastic. So let's move into our practice. Though the practice may have nothing to do with what I just said, but that's fine. You make your own connections here. So again, I want to start with light. I want to start with the light, but I want to go back into our subtle energy work, which I found to be very generative last week. So I'll start by just lighting a candle to signify the beginning of practice. Oops. All right, so beginning to light our candle for our practice. And again, this light, this flame, really begins to represent the energy of our consciousness, the energy that pervades everything, our minds, our consciousness, our bodies, the phenomenal world. It is more than just light. We always translate this kind of energy, some Bogakai energy is what we would say in the tradition, this kind of energy of awareness, of clarity, of wisdom, as light, as physical light, but it's not necessarily physical light like this. It's a felt experience of dynamic energy, awakened energy, vibrant energy, right? It is the absence of delusion, right? Which we always kind of set up as this dualism between light and dark, but just the energy, the vibrancy of our minds, of our bodies. And allowing yourself to attune to this light energy as well. So for me, so in my practice, what that means is that when I imagine this light filling up my body and my mind, this kind of gentle, radiant glow, but also, again, a very vibrant, I feel the vibrancy, the aliveness, the fluidity of this energy as well. So even moving a little further into practice, I invite you to first just notice the weight of your body making contact with the seat. So noticing how the seat lifts to hold you. It's like the seat is like rising to hold you and allowing the body to surrender into the seat. So as we move deeper into the practice, the seat really as an extension of the earth is always holding us and therefore is always grounding us. And sometimes I think when some of us move deeper into these kinds of practices, we kind of freak out a little bit, right? Because it feels very disassociating, right? And so this is why the seat and earth practices that we often do are really important to create a sense of grounding. you know. And for those of you who are active, travelers or do active journeys, like these consciousness realm journeys in your mind, like it's important to ground with the earth first, because the earth can actually kind of like grab you and pull you back into your body, into this timeline. if you've made the connection beforehand. And I often will burn, some type of like incense or herb, um, Palo Santos here, but or tobacco, which I practice with. These are just, earth element um, things that actually help me to ground, right? So I do it for grounding, not necessarily for changing energy, but like it helps me, to stay really present um, with the earth, you know. So feeling that grounding, returning back to the body. And we're going to do something very similar, almost probably the exact same practice from last week, but just returning back to the body, noticing again the outside of the body, the skin, your skin, your hair, nails. So this is the physical body. Okay? This is the physical body. We would say the form body. This is the form that we think we're arising in this realm, in this reality. But beneath the sensations of the physical form, so beneath maybe the sensation of skin, right, is a more subtle sensation or experience. And maybe you can connect to that sensation through maybe noticing body heat, warmth. And some of you can actually notice energy itself, right? Which is very hard to articulate, but warmth is an expression of energy. So we can use the warmth, so feeling that warmth that radiates beneath the surface of the physical form. And so connecting to that sensation is actually beginning to connect to our energy bodies. I would even say in, Tibetan Buddhist terminology, Sambhogakaya, energy, the energy form, the energy body. So just a few more moments. So we're going to shift a little outside of the subtle energy body. And I want you to call into the space your benefactors of the homecoming circle, right? And you can move through the homecoming circle practice, or for those of you who are new, just beginning to imagine that you're being surrounded by all the beings who love you, who care for you, all the beings who want you to be free. And you don't have to know who these beings are. These beings are teachers and guides and um, deities and so forth. So when you have these beings around you, just really feeling that they're there, beginning to imagine that they are gently, and this is really important here, because I want us to do something very particular here. So they begin to radiate this energy of care, this deep care for you, into the circle around you. So just imagining that for a few moments, that they're just radiating like the sun radiates light and heat. That your circle radiates this energy of care that begins to fill the space up around you. And so now, I want you to imagine that that energy that's being radiated from your circle begins to be absorbed into your energy body, the Sambhogakaya body. So it's like this energy of care is bypassing the form body and being deeply absorbed into the energy body. So sometimes what we may experience is the form body, the physical body becoming illusionary, and the energy body becoming more prominent. And it's okay if that's what you're feeling. That's part of the practice. But the energy body is absorbing the energy of care. And it's a very gentle absorption. And this is where I want us to kind of dwell in, is this experience of being gently restored on the energy body level from the care from our benefactors, just sitting and absorbing this energy. We're going to transition now to our mantra practice as well. So in the mantra, you can sit and listen or chant along, but I want your awareness to really stay within this absorption space. Like it feels like I'm drinking deeply, but also really calmly and subtly from this energy from my benefactors. So Teata, Umbekenze, Maha Bekenze, Rasa Sumangate Soha. Like this, I pray for the end of pain and suffering and the root of pain and suffering. And I release the energy of this prayer out to the worlds so that all may be liberated. So again, floating, resting, gently absorbing, drinking in this energy of care. Om Deatam Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Rasa Sumangati Sova. 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 Deatam Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Rasa Sumangati ma begenze, rasa sumangate soa. De ada begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumangate soa. De ada begenze, begenze, ma begenze, rasa sumangate soa. Theater, Begense, Begense, Ma Begense, Nase Sumungate Soa. Theater, Begense, Begense, Ma Begense, Nase Sumungate Soa. Theater, Begense, Begense, Ma Begense, Nase Sumungate Soa. Theater, Begense, Begenze, Maha Begenze, Rasa Sumungante Zoa, Deada, Begenze, Begenze, Maha Begenze, Rasa Sumungante Zoa, Deada, Begenze, Begenze, Maha Begenze, Rasa Sumungante Zoa, Deada, Begenze, Begenze, Maha Begenze, Rasa Sumungante Zoa. Theater, Begenze, Begenze, Ma Begenze, Rasa Sumangate Soa. 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 Theater, Begenze, Begenze, Genze, Rasu Sumangate Soa. Theater, Begenze, Begenze, Maha Begenze, Rasu Sumangate Soa. Theater, Begenze, Begenze, Ma Begenze, Rasu Sumangate Soa. Theater, Begenze, Begenze, Maha 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 Begenze, Rasu Sumangate Soa. So just turning our attention to the prayer request. Let me begin by just inviting all the beings who are able to hold these prayers and act on our behalf, inviting those beings into the space, all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yadams, Dharma protectors, all beings of light, angels, all the guardians of the land, the elders of the land, all the elements, including the earth, angels, all beings of light. We pray that you open to the receiving of our prayer requests and act on our behalf to bring about the fruition of these prayers. We offer prayers for myself who got laid off unexpectedly, and for myself that my lung function improves. Offering prayers for Jay, who has suffered deep grief and sadness. Prayers for Anna, who was recently diagnosed with cancer and is having surgery in a couple of weeks. Prayers for her family as they support her through this process. Offering prayers for my sister Lulu, recovering from a stroke. May she heal quickly and fully and have strength and peace. Offering prayers for me as I heal from an injury. Prayers for Sal. Offering prayers for me as I gear up to quit my job. May I hold the tensions that arise and be open to all that is meant to unfold. May I be present to my freedom and rootedness. Offering prayer for me so that I may be free from karmic patterns and for the freedom of Hector, Jamal, Kanda, Ivana, Giga, and Nirvana. Offering prayers for Anita, currently in the ICU on the ventilator. Prayers that her family has everything they need at this time. Prayers for me to release old patterns and addictive tendencies that have recently resurfaced. Offering prayers for the upcoming resolution of P's legal case. May all involved find some kind of peace and not be further harmed by the judicial system. Offering prayers for less physical pain so I can feel free and help my students feel freedom and agency. Offering prayers for my father, Ruben, who is moving through sudden symptoms of vertigo, and my mother, Monicia, who is taking care of him and experiencing lots of physical pain and discomfort. Prayers for my aunt, who is close to passing from cancer, and for my uncle, who is caring for her. For my aunt E, who is struggling to hold space with the family. For my wife and A, who had biopsies recently. For J and R. Offering prayers for everyone experiencing grief in their lives right now. Offering prayers for me as I navigate supporting myself financially. Offering prayers for our sexual healing. May we all be free to experience embodied pleasure. For MJ and all who are grieving his loss. For my brother as he moves through and with. For the healing of my community in Atlanta after the murder of Toto Gita, a forest offender, by the police. For Claire and her family as they navigate grief and loss, may they receive all the love and care and time they need. For the healing of my body, spirits that I may be able to bring a child into the world. Prayers for Robert F., who died suddenly last Friday. Prayers for his family as they grieve. Prayers for my friend Beth as she grieves her little brother and becomes one of the last members of her family in this plane. Prayers for my son, may he find a way to contentment and peace within himself. Prayers for myself as I learn to heal. Prayers for Nadia as she travels this week and she heals. Prayers for all sentient beings to become free. Prayers for all those who have suffered from violence, oppression, and injustice. Prayers for my stepdad as he ongoingly navigates serious health issues. Prayers for anyone navigating chronic illness. Prayers for my friend Elaine Orr, who is at the ER with extremely high blood sugar. For my friend Shia, that this newly implanted device will lower his chronic pain. For Tamara Booker, recovering from surgery. For Shava Bailey with chronic illnesses. Damkrana with lung cancer. Kathy and Ed dealing with Ed's prostate cancer. For Bill Dow, whose memorial service was last week. Windsor Bardo several weeks ago. For Beth Harden and her family. For myself, knee problems and pain related to that, anxiety in general. and also clarity about what sorts of things will assist my physical healing from a number of different things. To detox from big overgrowth of candida. Offering prayers for Tyree Nichols' family and community as they grieve his murder by police. Prayers for Bumina, Lama Rod, everyone making Bumi's martial possible. For Tibet, for all beings and realms that suffering may end, for abundance and ease for all, especially the ancestors. Prayers for Rishi, Nina, for Jessica, Lauren, Jayanta, Hari, and for myself as I continue to work towards finishing my degree within my decolonization practice, the ivory tower, and for all the work. Prayer for myself to continue on this path and continue to do what I must do to stay with this and to release my anger in ways that are guided by my spirit. Prayers that the queer, phobic, and transphobic bills in the legislature of mine and other states do not pass, that all trans and queer people have the support and care they need, and that the people responsible for these bills and their supporters be free and have what they need. Prayer for Patrick and his family as he faces the consequences of cancer. And I continue to pray for my sister as she begins to near her delivery date for the peaceful transition, healthy transition of her first child into this world. I continue to pray for the abolition of all systems of violence, that all beings may one day have access to the resources that they need to be well, safe, and happy. And may we all be released from the entanglements and the bondage of carceral logics, that we may lean towards and into the freedom of space rather than getting bound by trauma. That we all be free as quickly as possible. And releasing the energy of these prayers to those we've invited to hear these prayers, we imagine that they begin to work on our behalf to bring about the fruition of all of our prayers and hopes and aspirations. As we enter into the last portion of our practice, we will continue with the visualization, but also adding one more component, that as we continue to absorb this energy of care into our energy bodies, that we also begin to imagine that our energy bodies begin to release really the trauma in our energy bodies, just everything, the sorrow, the grief, the pain, the suffering, despair, releasing that energetically from really the bottoms of our bodies, maybe from our feet, from our sitting bones, maybe releasing that energy down into the earth, where the earth will absorb and neutralize that energy on our behalves, right? So absorbing this energy from our benefactors, releasing essentially the suffering that we're experiencing into the earth for the earth to neutralize, right? So we continue. O te ada begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raja sumangante zoa. Te ada begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raja sumangante zoa. Te ada begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raja sumangante zoa. They are down the Mahabharata as a Sumati. They are down Begans, Mahabharata as a Sumati. Hata umbeyenze beyenze mabeyenze lazumagarizua 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 hata umbeyenze lazumagarizua hata umbeyenze beyenze mabeyenze 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 lazumagarizua So just bringing your attention back to your benefactors around you. Imagine that they begin to dissolve into white light. Imagine that white light being absorbed into your body. And just sitting in that energy body. We're just going to turn our attention just briefly, just for a couple of moments, to the practice of Durga, or rather chanting, supplicating Mother Durga. Mantra Dum Durgaye Namaha. And just letting this supplication, this chanting to Mother Durga, really allowing her to move through and just kind of settle everything that feels like is kind of popping and arising. Okay. And imagine too, if you want, just all the expressions of the mother begin to fill the space, from Kali to Tara to Mother Mary to Mary Magdalene, you know, to Khadijah, to any of the sacred expressions of the mother that you feel close to. Begin just with and then moving into the mantra. Okay. Dum Daye Namaha. 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 Om Dum Duraye 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 Namaha. Shifting our attention now to Shantideva's prayer, which we'll recite 3 times to close our practice. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. And lastly, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach to the ends of space. Okay, all right, great, everyone. Thank you so much for your practice. If there's a question that we need, please let me please offer that in just these last few minutes.
Miles, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Miles, how you doing?
Hey, Lama Rod, I'm good.
Good.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, you still farming? You farming? You on the farm? The
Yeah,
rice?
I am.
Oh yeah, oh, that's hot. I like that.
Also, I want to say hey to the Medicine Buddha community. It's cool to see everyone. My question is, earlier you mentioned that almost all of your practice looks like working with suffering to get free, and I was wondering if you could share a practice that you come to, or how we can be more intentional with that in Medicine Buddha.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really about not trying to run away from the suffering, right? So, it's okay to start practice and say, you know what, I want this to feel less painful, right? But you have to be very careful that the underlying intention of that is not to run away from it, right? But what we do, one prayer that we can offer really is, may I get the practice or the experiences that I need in this moment, right? And then when you say need, when I pray for what I need, then I'm also entrusting the practice itself and my homecoming circle to actually do this work of helping me to get what I need in the moment, right? And so whatever happens, happens. So whatever happens, I know that like it's for my benefit. And that takes a lot of trust to hold that. So whatever happens is for my benefit. Right. Just like when we drink medicine, it's like you don't pray to the medicine, for certain experiences, you say that, I just, please help me to do the work of getting free, and the medicine will offer you the work that you need to move through. Right. And then you're grateful at the end, no matter how difficult it is. There has to be gratitude there because you're doing something really important, even though it feels like hell. But you will experience the spaciousness that opens from that labor in the future. So I'm very grateful for everything that I've done in the past. Like anytime I'm in like a lot of suffering, moving through a practice, I say, you know what, this is important because this is laying the groundwork and the seeds and planting the seeds for something else to happen down the road. And that keeps me going. I'm not just suffering to suffer, right? Which we can do. That could definitely be it. We can just suffer to suffer and practice it. Let's not really practice it. But when we say, I want to be free from this, then that's when the practice really begins for us. And we get what we need to move through it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lama Rod, there's a question about which mantra we should be chanting, and I have lost the capacity to put anything in the chat. It's another technical glitch. So I know Eric's here and he can put that document in the chat. It's the Medicine Buddha mantra is the answer to that question. And
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. The Medicine Buddha mantra that we just practiced. I think, yeah, so that's it. That's the link. So all the instructions are there for the mantra practice. So just to let everyone know, people who weren't here maybe 2 weeks ago, we are in a mantra accumulation practice for the main mantra Teata, Bekenze. And the instructions for that practice are there in that link. And the practice will change every month. Slightly.
And we have 2 more questions, Anita. Oh, you have to, yes, good.
Thank you. When I came in, you were talking about trauma. And I have been thinking about Prajnaparamita for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something about our tendency to fall back.
Mm-hmm.
And Prajnaparamita is called the mother of the 3 Buddhas who have conquered the 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to what that means?
Yeah, so for Prajnaparamita. Yeah, so Prajnaparamita is the I would say I would use the language of mother. Like she is the expression of space itself. And so Prajnaparamita is, well, she's expression of wisdom. I'm sorry, she's expression of space and emptiness. which means that she is also an expression of wisdom. But she is also, Prajaparamita is the mother of all the Buddhas, because without emptiness or space, there would be no existence or anything. So Prajaparamita is the mother of all of us. And so so the mother, the cosmic universal mother is Prajaparamita as well. And she's trying to move us through the webs, the entanglements of trauma, right? Which we have identified, well, we've normalized trauma, and so it's hard for us to understand what space and emptiness are, because we're so self-identified with trauma. And we say, well, this is who I am, right? And this is an expression of a particular moment in your mind, but it's not the expression of the totality of your mind, right? And that's what we're trying to get to, is back to the fullest, most authentic expression of the mind, which is also an expression of Prajaparamita. Right.
We have one more question. You'll have to unmute yourself, I think.
Lama Rod.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was wondering, for my home practice, sometimes I say the mantra silently, usually because I'm very tired. I was wondering if that was okay.
Yeah, I absolutely. As long as you're aware and that's moving, in your mind, absolutely.
Okay. And the second question I had similarly is, usually when I do it alone, I just kind of breathe a little bit and ground myself and then do the mantra. I don't do the whole visualization, everything. And I was wondering if that's okay, or if I should change that.
No, it's fine. It's just, I just want you working with the mantra, so whatever feels, this is the reality of practicing in the world, because we're not, and most of us, I would assume, maybe all of us are not monastics, so we're not just, also there's a misunderstanding that all monastics do is sit around and chant all day. That's not been my experience. It was my experience in 3-year retreat, but because that was our job. That's what we were there to do, was to just, chant, meditate. But, a lot of them, anyway, I'm not going to get into all of this. Just to say that, going back and just saying that, there are real obstacles that we're moving through as we try to incorporate these practices into our lives, like being tired. We're busy, and so I just want us to get to the mantra in any way that's, in any way.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
One more, Remy and Jasper.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, I just have a question. I'm fairly new to this practice, and I guess basically what happens sometimes is when I'm beginning to feel the energy body arising, it can progress into a rather intense feeling of pressure, and then acceleration. And some days it's not so much, other days it's so intense it feels like I might just fly off the face of the planet. And usually my tendency is to ground when that happens. But I'm curious, if it's perhaps something I should be just allowing to progress, or what?
Well, the grounding there is really important, because ultimately what we're trying to do is hold both groundedness and this kind of fluidity together at the same time, and also to have a kind of agency over that kind of fluidity as well. So it's not like you're being carried away, but you can experience it and then return back to a sense of groundedness at the same time, you know. But when you're just, moving through the day, you feel that kind of expansion happening. Yeah, you do really want to get back to grounding practices, grounding practices meaning using an anchor. So you want to find an anchor, just anchor your awareness. Like it's like holding on to something as you may feel as if you're being swept away. Let's just hold on to something, anchor in something, and let that expansion just kind of happen, right? And you can let it happen because you're feeling really grounded in something. Sometimes using the breath is helpful, like when we feel like the pressure is really resistance. Like there's aversion to the ways in which we feel our consciousness expanding. And that aversion comes from fear, right? So it's like, what's happening, right? And not to say that like these grounding practices and anything that I offer isn't necessarily going to fix everything, because the reality is that the deeper we engage in these practices, the more we will experience this groundlessness in life, right? And so what we're being called to do is figure out how to be in the world and also be attentive and tending to this experience of higher levels of consciousness at the same time. Right? And that's the work in a way that's helping us to evolve our community, our society, right? Like we are spiritual beings, but we have lost the capacity to integrate those experiences of the spiritual into our lives because we have these very samsaric carceral institutions that are always attempting to degrade us solely into a physical form expression, cutting us off from our energetic expressions, So when you're doing these practices, there's an innate reality. This is there's a real kind of disruption of samsara, right? Because you begin to lose your belief and your attachment to the samsaric world because you're touching into the truth of everything through these practices. So those are the consequences, right? Those are consequences that personally I have to navigate every day. That, I know some of you are quite advanced practitioners who've been in these very similar practices for decades. These are the things you have to navigate. You will change, right? And it becomes maybe a situation where you have to be very skillful in how you're holding this change. That you may develop the capacity to see a lot of things about a lot of people, but that doesn't mean you become like a touched by an angel. You don't become like Della Reese. I know I just went way back to the 90s. I know touched by an angel was a phenomenon that I was wrapped up in, for those of you who are of a certain age, and you just don't go around talking about, listen, I see all this stuff about you, I'm going to tell you everything. That's just not what you do, right? So you have to kind of hold, and this is where the heartbreak of the whole thing comes up. The heartbreak that you are beginning to develop this clarity, and that clarity is really about the ways in which people are suffering and the ways in which you're very much limited in disrupting that suffering.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, so you're not, this is not about us feeling special. are extraordinary. This is a, I don't want to say burden, but it's a weight. It's a weightiness that one carries. Like, because you become a witness to what is unseen. Right. And the difficulties that arises with knowing that like what you're seeing just has to happen sometimes.
Hmm.
And this is why having, allotted space every day to practice, figuring out retreat time every year is really important. So you can just have the space where you can just kind of go off, you can just like, just like let it loose, because you have to, this is Tantra is the path of extremism, which, of course doesn't sound great, but extremism meaning that like you have to hit these extremes to understand where you belong, and you have to go into these places. You have to go, far, far out into the wilderness sometimes of your mind, sometimes, to really understand your capacity and who you are. And then you're able to come back into the middle where you're able to hold and balance all these experiences together.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that's it. Thank you all so much. I'm gonna be offering probably in Chenrezig, just I'm gonna do more advanced practice in breath work. Because for me, breath work has been a really powerful doorway into these higher levels of consciousness, right? And I think that some of you are ready to start exploring that a little more. So we're gonna create spaces, and that's not a space for everyone, because it's a lot of energy in pranayama that we're opening, so it takes a little bit of work and groundedness, but I want to do that, sooner than later as well. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, Chenrezig, all that stuff is coming up next month in 2 days, 1 day. So watch out for that. Also, join me for Free Radicals on Thursday, 2 p.m., no, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and then whatever for the UK. And also mark your calendars for March 4th. I'm going to be doing an in-person 1 day thing here in Atlanta on the 4th. So it's not going to be streamed. It's not going to be online. It's going to be in person on the 4th, Saturday, March the 4th. So we're going to get that information out soon as well. Okay, so I think that's it. So thank you all so much for your practice, and I hope to see you all maybe on Thursday for Free Radicals. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.